Imagine walking straight toward an enemy tank, wearing a padded, bloated suit filled with explosives. No cover, no retreat, only forward. During the brutal early years of the Eastern Front, Soviet engineers experimented with one of the most terrifying concepts ever tested in modern warfare: a walking bomb suit. A weapon that required a soldier to get close enough to die, so the enemy machine could die with him. But why create something so extreme? Why design a weapon that demanded its operator sacrifice everything? Today, we uncover the forgotten experiment behind the Soviet walking explosive suit, a weapon meant for missions where survival wasn't expected. Only results were. In 1941 and 1942, Soviet forces were being crushed by German armor. Entire divisions were swallowed by blitzkrieg assaults. Anti-tank rifles failed. Mines were unreliable. And with factories still evacuating east, the Red Army desperately needed a solution, any solution, to stop the steel beasts rolling toward Moscow. That desperation sparked a series of radical engineering ideas, and one of them was this experimental bomb suit. So, what exactly was this suit? On paper, it wasn't officially labeled as a suicide weapon. It was classified as protective gear for assault sappers, elite engineers trained to approach bunkers, barricades, and even tanks during close-quarters combat. Their mission was simple and horrifying: get close enough to place explosive charges where nothing else could reach. The suit itself looked almost absurd, a massive, overstuffed cocoon of quilted fabric and insulation. But every layer had a purpose: to protect the soldier long enough to crawl across open ground under machine gun fire and survive the shockwave of his own explosives. In reality, survival was unlikely. Everyone involved understood that. The engineering behind the suit was brutally practical. The thick, quilted armor could blunt shrapnel and reduce burns from blast pressure. Reinforced straps allowed soldiers to carry heavy demolition charges, sometimes up to several kilograms, directly on their chest or in handheld metal cassettes. These weren't timed grenades. They were shaped charges, designed to punch through bunker walls or rip open the underbelly of a tank. Approach was everything. Assault sappers trained to move low, slow, and silent, often in freezing mud, waiting for the exact moment the tank rolled over them. One charge placed beneath the hull could immobilize it instantly. But to get that close, the suit was the only thing keeping them alive long enough to complete the mission. It was an invention born not from creativity, but from the simple, brutal math of the battlefield. One man, one tank, both destroyed. But behind every experiment, every diagram, every padded suit, there was a human being inside. Most assault sappers were barely older than boys, often volunteers, sometimes simply assigned without warning. They trained knowing they would be the first to enter a fortified position, and the last to leave it. Several surviving wartime diaries describe the same moment: the ground shaking as a tank approached, the cold mud pressed against their chest, the weight of explosives digging into their arms. One entry simply reads, "I could hear the engine before I could see it." For these soldiers, fear wasn't a possibility. It was a constant companion. They weren't symbols. They weren't myths. They were men ordered to do the impossible, and many tried anyway. On the battlefield, the walking bomb suit wasn't used in large numbers, but when it was deployed, the missions were among the most dangerous of the war. Sappers advanced ahead of infantry, clearing minefields, blasting openings in defensive walls, or slipping behind enemy armor during nighttime assaults. Against tanks, the method was terrifyingly simple. Get close, place the charge under the tracks or the hull, arm it, and run. Sometimes there was time to dive into a shell crater. Sometimes there wasn't. Modern anti-tank weapons didn't exist yet. These men were the weapon. witnesses recalled seeing a massive flash beneath a German vehicle, a burst of metal and fire, and the tank suddenly freezing in place. The suit had done its job. Whether the man inside survived was almost irrelevant to commanders. To them, the target was gone, and at that moment, that was all that mattered. As the war progressed, the walking bomb suit began to disappear from the battlefield. It wasn't officially canceled. It simply became obsolete. New weapons emerged, shaped charge launchers, anti-tank grenades, improved mines, and better artillery support. Suddenly, the idea of sending a single man toward a tank with a sack of explosives felt outdated and horrifyingly inefficient. Commanders learned that even with the suit's padding, the survival rate was devastatingly low. The soldiers inside were brave, but bravery alone could not beat the laws of physics. The shock waves, the shrapnel, the heat. The suit could delay death, but not prevent it. By 1943, more effective anti-tank solutions pushed these suits to the margins of history, remembered mostly by the few who saw them used, and by the even fewer who survived. Today, stories about Soviet suicide suits spread across the internet, usually exaggerated or stripped of context. But the truth is more complicated and more tragic. These suits were real, but they weren't mass-produced and they weren't officially intended as suicide devices. They were experimental tools created in a moment of desperation, when commanders were willing to try anything to stop the German advance. Some wartime accounts romanticize them. Others dismiss them as propaganda. The reality sits somewhere in between, a mixture of innovation, fear, sacrifice, and the brutal logic of total war. History often remembers what worked, but sometimes the ideas that failed or almost existed reveal even more about the mindset of the time. In the end, the walking bomb suit isn't just a strange piece of military engineering. It's a window into the psychology of a nation fighting for survival. It shows how war strips choices down to their rawest form. What can stop the enemy right now, no matter the cost? It reveals how innovation can grow not from imagination, but from fear, necessity, and the belief that every second counts. When we look at this suit today, it's easy to focus on the odd design or the shock value, but the deeper truth is this: someone had to wear it. Someone had to take that first step across frozen ground, holding explosives tight to their chest, knowing they might never step back. It's a reminder that behind every experimental idea, there are real people, whose stories often vanish under the weight of history. If you want to explore more hidden weapons, forgotten experiments, and concepts that almost reshaped history, consider subscribing. This channel dives into the strange ideas that appeared for a moment, then disappeared into the fog of war. Because stories like this one remind us of something important. History isn't just about what people achieved, it's about what they were willing to try, even when the odds were impossible.